Hello everyone, for this video we'll guide you through the basics of In Light of Shadows, showcasing the board, cards and actions. In Light of Shadows is a trading card game where two players fight using pre-built or custom decks. Whichever player does 7 direct damage to their opponent first is the victor. Let's start with deck building. When building your deck, you must first select your faction. The major factions available are the Grove Enclave, the Slovkin Empire, the Divine Ascendancy, and the Children. Your deck may only contain cards from selected factions or neutral cards. The card back, frame, or faction symbol can identify a card's faction. A deck may only contain 40 cards, and you may have up to 2 copies of a single card. If the card is considered legendary, there can be only 1 copy in the deck. Legendary cards are identifiable by their nameplate and the rarity icon on the upper right hand side. Your cards are separated into 3 types: Battalion, Garrison, and Psionic. Battalions are the primary way to directly damage an opponent or their battalions. You may also use your battalions to defend against opposing attacks. Here is a battalion card. You'll notice its focus indicator. This lets you know how much focus must be spent to play this card. The power indicator here shows the health and damage of the card. Battalions may also possess abilities that are visible on the card. We will discuss battalion abilities further a bit later. When playing a battalion, it must be placed on the front row of the board. Garrisons act as support cards, meaning they cannot attack or be attacked by an opponent battalion. They can be used to generate focus and may have different abilities, such as buffing battalions or drawing additional cards. Garrisons also have a focus requirement to set them on board. They are placed on the back row behind battalions. Psionic cards can be played directly from your hand, immediately activating their ability. The card must then be discarded. To play a Psionic, you must spend the appropriate focus indicated on the card. To play your cards, you must first generate focus. There are 2 ways to generate it. You may discard the card from your hand to gain 2 focus, or you can exhaust a garrison on your board to gain 1 focus per card you exhaust. When focus is spent playing a card, it is gone forever. The remaining focus will also be lost if you generate more focus than required to play the card. Think carefully about how you intend to manage this precious resource. Garrisons are first placed in the back row of the board and are exhausted. When a card is exhausted, it should be turned horizontally, like this. An exhausted card becomes active again at the start of your next turn. Whenever Garrison uses its ability or is used to generate focus, it will become exhausted. Sometimes Garrisons have conditions that must be met to activate their ability. This may include spending extra focus. There can be maximum of 5 Garrison placed on the back row, and there cannot be 2 of the same Garrison cards on the board. If you want to discard your Garrison from the board, you can do it during your turn, but it shouldn't be exhausted. To play the battalion from your hand, you must generate the required focus and place it on the front row of the board. When battalions are first played, they are in the unready state. This means they cannot attack this turn but can still defend. The condition ends at the start of your next turn and the battalion can be used as normal. There can be maximum 5 battalion cards placed on the front row. Battalion's power represents its health and damage. Therefore, when a battalion takes damage and their health decreases, so does their damage. When attacking an opponent, the opponent may use a battalion on their board to defend as long as it's not exhausted. Exhausted battalion cards cannot be used for defending. Both battalions will take damage to their health equal to the opposing card's power. If the power of either battalion is reduced to 0, it is destroyed and must be discarded. All battalions on the board will have their power fully restored at the end of each player's turn. After a battalion makes an attack, it is considered exhausted, so it must be turned horizontally. An exhausted battalion can no longer attack or defend. Your battalions are no longer exhausted at the start of your next turn. To win, you must attack the opposing player 7 times with a battalion. The opponent will take 1 direct damage for each attack, no matter the power of the battalion. Now let's talk about battalion card types. Taunt. Battalions with Taunt protects other battalions. The opponent will need to defeat the Taunt unit first to be able to attack other battalions or to target them with psionic cards or other card abilities. Quickstir. When a battalion with Quickstir attacks another battalion, it does not take damage if it destroys the battalion with the attack. It's important to note that this does not take effect when this card is used to defend. It only applies when attacking. Defense. A battalion with defense can defend even when exhausted. Rage. A battalion with Rage only activates their ability when they are damaged. Charge. A battalion with Charge can attack immediately when placed on the board and does not enter the unready state. Rise. A battalion with Rise only activates their ability when first placed on the board. Fall. A battalion with Fall activates its ability when it's destroyed on the board. Stealth. A battalion with Stealth cannot be directly targeted by an opponent's battalion or abilities from psionic or garrison cards until it is not in exhausted state. But have in mind that abilities which affect all battalions will also affect the Stealth unit. Constructs are special battalions unique to the Children's faction. These cards must be separated from the deck at the start of the match and placed in a separate pile next to your deck. Constructs do not have focus cost and cannot be drawn to your hand. They can only be played when summoned with an ability. When summoned, they are placed on the front row and are used like regular battalions. If destroyed, return the construct to its original pile. To play a psionic card, spend focus and then activate its ability. After using the ability, discard the psionic. Now let's see how the match is done during the game. First, flip a coin. Winner decides to play first or second. Whoever plays first draws 4 cards and whoever plays second draws 5. We are going first in this match, so we are starting with 4 cards while our opponent has 1 extra with 5. Before the start of the game, you and your opponent will be able to mulligan your cards. You can choose the cards you don't want to start with and replace them with new cards from the deck by reshuffling all cards back into the deck. You can mulligan your cards only once. After the mulligan, first turn starts. On the first turn, you have to discard your cards in order to generate focus. So we discard the card and play a garrison unit, which will be placed on the back row. We set it horizontally because when played from hand, it will be exhausted. We'll end our turn by drawing cards till we have 5 cards in our hand. Now the opponent's turn starts. As you can see, the opponent discarded the card to generate focus and played 1 battalion on the front row. The battalion has Rise ability, which activates right after the battalion is placed on the board. But the ability doesn't work because there are no other battalions on the field to buff. Now the opponent discards another card and plays 1 garrison unit on the back row of the board. As you can see, the garrison is exhausted, the opponent cannot use it. And the battalion is in unready state, so the player cannot use it for attacking but can defend with it. The opponent ended the turn by drawing cards, and now it's our turn. First, we make our exhausted cards active. Now we can exhaust our garrison card to generate 1 focus, play this battalion card and put it on the front row. Also, let's discard 1 card and play the garrison unit. This garrison has ability to damage the battalion, but it will cost 1 focus, and after that this garrison unit will be discarded. We cannot use this garrison because it is exhausted, but we can use it on our next turn. So now we have 2 garrison units, both exhausted, and 1 battalion unit in the unready state, which we cannot use for attacking, but we can use to defend. So now we draw cards and end our turn. Here is the opponent's turn, and it starts with activating exhausted cards. Now the opponent exhausts the garrison to generate focus so they can play their 1-cost battalion. They put it in unready state. The opponent has 2 battalion cards, one is in the ready state and the other is in unready. For this case we put the unready card lower than the ready one to remember that it is in an unready state. After that, discard 2 cards to play a 3-cost garrison. Notice the opponent generated 4 focus to play 3-cost garrison. Remaining focus will disappear, so it's better to calculate your focus correctly and not waste any generated focus. In this case, the opponent could discard 1 card to generate 2 focus, then exhaust the garrison card to generate 1 focus, and then play a 3-cost card. But the opponent has already exhausted the garrison unit to play another card, so there is no other choice. Now the opponent can use its ready battalion unit to attack. Opponents can attack us or our battalion, but the opponent decides to attack us. Now, as our battalion unit is not in an exhausted state, we can use it to defend. But also we can choose to take damage and not sacrifice our battalion and use it later for board control. Okay, so we decided not to defend. The opponent's battalion attacks us directly and we take 1 damage. Direct attacks don't depend on the battalion unit power number. You always take 1 damage. We'll lose the match if we take hit like this 7 times. So this was the first hit, so we can take 6 more attacks before losing. Now the opponent exhausted the battalion, which was used for attacking. The opponent draws cards and now is our turn. We have many ways to play. We can use the garrison's ability to destroy the first battalion on the board and use our battalion to attack the opponent's exhausted unit to clear the board. Or ignore the exhausted unit and attack the opponent directly, because the opponent cannot use an exhausted battalion to defend. But let's be smart and try to do both. Dominate in front row and deal damage to the opponent. First, let's exhaust our first garrison to generate 1 focus and use the second garrison's ability to deal 4 damage to the battalion there. It has 2 power, so by inflicting 5 damage it will be destroyed and go to the discard pile. As mentioned here, it will also be discarded after using the garrison's ability. Usually when using a garrison's ability it gets exhausted, but in this case the ability specifies we must discard it. After this, let's discard 2 cards generating 4 focus and play a 3-cost charge battalion. Charge battalions are in a ready state when played, meaning I can use this to attack immediately. Let's use this card to destroy the opponent's remaining battalion. Our card has 2 power and the opponent's has 1 power. The opponent's battalion will be discarded and our battalion will have its power reduced by 1 and be exhausted. But it will recover from being damaged when we end the turn, so no worries here. Our last move will be using our first battalion to attack the opponent directly. So now we control the board and the opponent has received 1 damage. We need to attack our opponent 6 more times to win. So we end the turn and the battalions recover their power. So it's opponent's turn again, and the opponent activates exhausted cards and decides to play defensive. The opponent exhausts 1 of the garrison cards and discards a card to generate 3 focus and play this 3-cost battalion unit with 3 power. And for the last move, the opponent exhausts the second garrison unit to generate 1 focus and plays 1-cost battalion with 1 power and taunt ability. Battalion units with taunt ability will not allow us to attack other battalion units until we deal with the unit with taunt ability. So now the opponent has 2 unready battalion units on the board and cannot attack. So the opponent draws cards from the deck and ends the turn. Let's fast forward and see the scenario when the deck pile has ended and no player has attacked the other player 7 times. We call that situation fatigue. If your deck is over at the end of your turn, you will take 1 damage for each card you must draw. So here we have 3 cards and we need to draw 2 cards to have 5 in the hand. We will take 2 damage because the deck pile has no cards left in it. Also, if we play a Psionic which ability is drawing a card, we will also take 1 damage for every card we need to draw. That is everything you need to know about how to play in Light of Shadows. Thank you for watching.